Are your comics going to be worth anything 20 years from now? Well, that is the question that I'm going to answer in a brand new series where I share reasons to be both optimistic and concerned about the future of the comic book market. And today we're going to get started by talking about a topic that I think is going to have a massive impact on the comic book market, but that I have never heard anyone talk about. And we're going to have the help of this mystery graph. Now, think to yourself, what does this graph represent? Probably some of you look and say, hey, I bet that's the comic book boom. You have right before COVID here, and then you have this giant spike, and then it starts to come down quite a bit a couple of years from now, and it's leveled out, maybe still going down a little bit. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. This is not a graph of the comic book boom, but it is a graph of a boom because this is a graph of the fertility rate in the US over the last 100 years. Now, if you've never seen this graph before, right here you have the Great Depression. And as you might know, the economy is often tied to the fertility rate and along with people's outlook for the future. And of course, here people don't have a lot of money. They're not optimistic about the future, so they don't have any children. But then World War II happens. Everybody comes home. They've been missing their wives. They've been missing their girlfriends. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of getting together and also a lot of optimism about the future. And boom, you have that baby boom that peaks in 1960 at almost 4 children per couple. And then beginning in 1960, though, you start to have this gradual decline until about 2000. And then you have a little uptick, not much, you can barely see it there, until it's continued to go down since then, and we currently have the lowest birth rate in recorded U.S. history. Now, you might be thinking, what in the heck does this have to do with the comic book market? Well, I think it's going to have a huge impact over the next 20 years. And in those first 20 years, I think it's going to help the comic book market grow in value, because something that is necessary for collectibles like comics to increase in value is that the population needs to have disposable income. And as any of you who are parents know, the fewer the kids, the more the income is disposable. In other words, if you are in search for a CGC 9.8 Amazing Spider-Man number 300, but all of a sudden little Johnny needs braces, well, you can't get that ASM, and so you put it off for a couple of years. But then, just as you've got the money again, little Susie needs her braces. And once again, you've got to put off buying that ASM 300. And then you finally have the money, but now you're here. And there's still 3 kids in your family, and little Billy needs braces. And you have to put off getting that ASM 300. But if you only have 2 children, then all of a sudden you only need to pay for 2 sets of braces and you got a bit more money. If you've only got 1 child, then you've only got to wait for little Johnny to get his braces off. And of course, and what is becoming more common, if you don't have any children, then all of a sudden you can get that ASM right now. And so I think you've got a lot of millennials and Gen Zers who in the next 20 years will start earning some serious money. And if they continue this trend and don't have children, well, they're going to be looking for things to buy. And all of a sudden, hey, I like that ASM 300 you have. Oh, hey, I like that New Mutants 98 you have. I love the Deadpool movie. And so you're going to have a lot more demand for these comic books, which of course is going to drive the price of those books up. However, in about 20 years, you're going to have another massive shift because, and I'm sorry to tell you this, boomers, and I'm not too far behind as a Gen Xer, this group of people are going to be in their 80s, and that means they're sadly going to start passing away. And when that happens, of course, their children are going to start selling their collections. And all of a sudden, you've got these massive collections that have grown for decades that are going to start flooding the market. You know, some of you know, a few years ago, my father-in-law told me that he had a bunch of comics in his basement and he didn't even know what was in them. And he said I could have them. And so I went down and there were some awesome books like An Incredible Hulk 181, first appearance of Wolverine. But those comics had just been sitting there forever. And he's a boomer and nobody knew that they were there. Well, how many other boomers are sitting here and will pass away, and then all of a sudden these books that weren't on the market go and flood it? But the problem is, who the heck is going to be there to buy those books? There's just not going to be the demand for those books. And not because comics aren't popular. Of course, a lot of people talk about the lack of demand for comic books in the future because people will lose interest in them. And I do think that's a concern that I'll address in another video. But let's just imagine a world where everybody loves comics just as much as they do now. The perfect world for all of us. Well, still, the demand goes down because there just aren't enough people to fulfill that demand. And so, of course, the higher the supply, the lower the prices, and the lower the demand, the lower the prices. And so I think in 20 years, you're going to have a much higher supply and a much lower demand. And so that scares me when it comes to the comic book market. And in fact, in probably 10 or 15 years, I'm probably going to end up selling the bulk of my collection because of this fear, and I don't want to leave my children with these worthless comic books. Now, of course, I will save the ones that are most valuable to me and that do have some value to them and probably will still maintain value. I mean, it's not like Hulk 181 is going to go to zero, but I don't know if it's going to command the prices that it does now. So, of course, what this means is that if you want the comic book market to remain healthy, then you guys need to start having some babies. Now, me, I have 7, so I'm doing my share. My friend Jacob from Jacob Comics, I know he has 5, so he's doing his share. I mean, where would these averages be if we weren't around? Now, what about you guys? Are you doing your share? Now, of course, I'm just teasing. I know kids aren't for everyone, and certainly some people just should not have kids. But I will say, if you are on the fence about whether or not to have kids, obviously I'm a big fan, and so I would encourage you to take the plunge. They're pretty awesome. In fact, what got me back into comics during COVID was watching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends with my children and sharing my love of comic books and superheroes with them. And now I'm having a lot of fun continuing to share that love with them, especially as we watch through the MCU movies and things like that. And I look forward to one day leaving those comics that I do hold on behind to them, sharing those with them for decades, leaving that Hulk 181 to only one of them. I mean, that might be touchy, but of course, I guess I'll leave it to the one who shows the most interest in comic books, and I'll try to make it up with the other kids and keep things as even as I can. But it's going to be cool to take that book that I got from my father-in-law and then pass it on to my child, his grandchild. Now, I'm curious, if you're a parent, do you share this hobby with your children? Or is this hobby your place to escape from all the seriousness of life and just have a little bit of me time? If you do share this hobby with your family, I'm curious, are there any particular heroes or books that are important to you guys? Also, tell me, do you like the whiteboard? Did you find this helpful? Should I use this in more videos? I'd really appreciate your feedback. Now, of course, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I'd appreciate it if you consider doing so now, because I would love to monetize this channel and help me feed my 7 kids. So have mercy on me. Help me get to 1,000 subs so that I can start monetizing. Comment, like, thank you.